Chapter 13. X. X could hardly believe a liquid that could dull his senses to black could leave him so refreshed in the morning's light. From the ferry's bow, he watched the sun illuminate Mount Olympus, one spire at a time. Whether from the Natura da elixir itself or the good night's sleep it elicited, X felt refreshed. Happy, even. It had been ages since he'd looked at the mount without feeling the weight of doom. He actually smiled as Holy Lake's morning fog cloaked his face in its dewy embrace. At the pier, he hired a carriage to take him to the palace. A non-palace driver could only take him to the outside wall, but X looked forward to the peaceful morning stroll uphill to the palace. Alas, X's optimism vanished with the look from the wall's guard. "Where you been?" he barked through the intercom as X stepped down from the carriage. Ignoring the sassy sentry, X stepped under the arch, beyond the guard's glare. No one would ruin his morning. X held the handle of the door, awaiting the lock to release. After a few beats, he poked his head beyond the arch. The guard had disappeared from his station. With a low growl, X approached the guard's station and rapped on the door. A dull pain at the base of his skull began to throb. The guard returned, avoiding eye contact with X. X knocked on his door again. The guard did not acknowledge him. Pushing down a burning desire to throw a rock through the window, X knocked again and said sternly, "Open the gate." Leisurely, the guard picked up his microphone and said, "You're to wait right here." "For who?" X shouted into the window. The guard put up his feet and began reading a book. An hour later, from behind the gate, X heard the engine of a carriage and the wheels rumbling over the bridge's stone. The guard jumped out of his seat, swung open the door, and practically kneed X in the head as he brushed by him to man the wheel. For X's part, he stood, bracing his lower back as he bent backward in a stretch. The inside gate began to squeal open as the outside guard inserted his key and began rigorously turning his wheel to open the outside aldemnesium door. The double security system had never been used against intruders, but X couldn't help wondering how long that streak might last. When the gate had fully opened, Abraham's carriage waited on the other side. One look at the driver, and X could tell someone important was either already in the carriage or waited at their destination. When the driver had barely stopped the carriage before hopping down to open the door for X, X knew. X's great morning had quickly soured as he hopped into the carriage with Abraham, who informed him that while they waited for Isabel to succeed where her brother had failed, the two of them would embark on a father-son bonding trip to the heart of the forest's claim, Istenafold. And on their way, they would ruin the Kirali's victory celebrations. The trip down the mountain, over Holy Lake, and onto the train beside his deathly silent father hadn't been the way X envisioned returning to the forest. Still, X attempted to recapture some of the positive spirit which had filled his heart that morning by thinking about the crisp forestian air, the fresh cry stews, and the opportunity to practice little spoken accents and variations of Arbano. As they approached the forest, where trains were seldom used, X broke the silence. "Do you worry about the tracks?" "In what regard?" asked Abraham. "Age. Maybe sabotage," X suggested. "Humph," Abraham puffed. Another wordless dismissal from his father forced X's mind to the quiet retreat of his thoughts. Of course he wouldn't worry. Who would dare question such an important thing as a 700 years ago fail? This authoritarian rule cannot last. 'Tis most obvious they'll rise, again. Stronger this time than of the past. The main train station in Komencanta had once been the epicenter of Forestian revolution. It wasn't where the earthquake of revolt started, but where it met the surface and vibrated outward, destroying so many lives with it. As a term of the surrender, trains with more than 20 passengers were forbidden to travel anywhere in forest. This stipulation effectively crippled Forestians without inconveniencing the isle. As the locomotive pulled to a stop at the ghostly platform, X hopped down first, quickly directing Abraham's servants to pull out the luggage, load it into this carriage, prepare that carriage for his father, and many other logistics that came to him as easy as breathing now. Barking orders had become a new skill X had never desired or imagined he would acquire. Help Abraham down, X directed the sturdiest-looking servant. As he waited, X took in the train station's silence. Obviously built to manage thousands of travelers and trade, with wide-open platforms around 3 empty rail tracks and a locked-up station 20,000 square paces, the scene ran a chill down X's spine. The silence continued on the carriage ride to the Kirali's Forticayo. It sat between Abraham and X like a mistress. Does it make him uncomfortable? X wondered, but said nothing. When they arrived to the Pentagon fort, the drawbridge was closed, a formidable greeting for their unwelcome visit. Abraham broke the silence by saying, "In your next treaty, define a moat." A challenge given the assumption of intention. Is it a moat or just a canal? X countered. Abraham huffed. No one requires a seafaring route from the east side of this fortress to the west. Abraham's statement was like a giant period on the conversation. As they watched the drawbridge open, X thought aloud, perhaps it's drawbridges we should restrict. Abraham exhaled. Like the moat, his tone was ambiguous, as easily commendation as condemnation. Once inside the 6-meter-high walls, small support buildings dotted their path to the Boulevard of Freedom. New name, X pointed out. Up the 200-meter winding path, the carriage stumbled over large stones and cavernous trenches carved into the dirt, a path designed to dissuade visitors. Every 10th jostle, when the carriage would tilt to accommodate a particularly large obstacle and send X sliding into a corner or across the carriage, Abraham would groan, the low growl of someone irritated with their aging, while steadying himself against the stability pole X had installed on the carriage floor. But in Abraham's frustration, X stared, waiting to see something beneath the surface, foolishly hoping for some small cue he had noticed X's competence in managing this trip, in anticipating his needs and accommodating him as best as anyone possibly could. But Abraham's gaze was fixed ahead, impassive. For all his faults, Abraham was consistent. X swallowed, forcing his expression neutral. Then, the carriage came to an abrupt stop. From beyond the door, the carriage operator hollered, "You'll need to walk from here, I'm afraid." X opened the carriage door. He'd seen the Forticajo on many occasions, but never been within the walls, and never up the path to its feet. Leaning out the door, his awestruckness overtook the indifference he knew he should display. Rising above him, the towers of the Kirali's home rose more imposing than they were from a distance. And the steps, by gods, the famed 317 steps glistened in the morning sun remarkably. Collecting himself, he stepped out of the carriage and began directing the servants which bags to prioritize for the climb up to the fort. As they scurried around executing their tasks, X glanced at the first step, newly created from the armor of the latest fallen enemy, the general of the Forgotten Forest's military. They had met once. X remembered him as a good character. 318 steps now, he thought sadly. Or was it bitterly? Unlike at the train station, they were now within eyesight of Kirali's spies. Instead of a servant who wouldn't know the way of it, X helped his father down from the carriage and braced his footing over to the stone wall beside the steps, looking as unbothered as possible to maintain the mystique of Abraham's health and prowess. In truth, gravity was finally taking its toll on Abraham, who was taking longer and longer to get his spine to a fully erect position. With the luggage unloaded, the carriages clattering back down the hill, and the servants almost to the top with the first round of luggage, X removed the stair climber from his backpack. Abraham sat on it, programmed it to follow X's movements, and then they too were climbing the stairs. Such inventions, not yet globally available, caused a lot of questions. The Eilers long ago realized they could attempt to wipe the knowledge, a tricky process, or simply avoid the entire distraction. They preferred avoidance. At a scenic overlook, timing their stop so they'd avoid the descending servants, the pair stopped. Abraham moved from the stair climber to a bench at the overlook. X packed the contraption away. Then they gazed over the whole of the east side of Komencanta toward the isle. On the horizon, the Sentinel Mountains towered. There, carved in the stone of the railing, X ran his index finger over the word "Gods" with an angry deep line crossing through it. "You've made good progress, Lord," one impressed servant commented as he passed. X gave him a wave and nod as acknowledgement, wondering if simple minds like that really thought the gods were incredible physical specimens or said things like that out of habit. Abraham did not move. With the servants again out of eyesight, Abraham reboarded the stair climber. X resumed his climb. It felt strange to be in front of Abraham when X so often trailed him, physically, in conversation, or in logic. The gentle, mechanical whirling of the stair climber served as good background noise for X's churning mind. In many ways, Kierley Wilhelm was a short-term nuisance, like the rulers before him. A pure-blood Nasco, at 36, Wilhelm only had about a decade remaining to his lifespan. Nashi aged rapidly at the end, even faster than Neogenes. Once they started to gray and wrinkle, they only had a few years left. The forest kings rarely left the castle toward the ends of their reigns. Most were content to sit on their throne on high, rule their little fiefdom, die fat, and leave their first son the same destiny. But Kierley Wilhelm had proven different. He had taken over the neighboring territories, and then their neighbors, and then, until he had united almost everything that was strategically divided by the century men. Although, of course, no one really believed Kierley Wilhelm to be extraordinary. Indeed, the only thing that differentiated him from his predecessors was his malleability. Like the Aldemnesium in the Forgotten Forest, Kierley Wilhelm had demonstrated a unique ability to mold himself into whatever shape required, with a handle that only fit the hand of Alex der Schoenvlast. The question was never, what will Kierley Wilhelm do next, but rather, what will Alex the Great convince him to do?